Greetings, I am Tom Earl. On this week's episode, we talk mental health, passion, and self-care with Mikah Miller. Check it out.
Yeah.
Greetings, I am Tom Earl, and this is my year of grace. We know you could be anywhere, so the fact that you are here today, sharing your greatest gifts, your time and energy means the world to me. I hope you know that in this very moment, you are appreciated, you are valued, and you are loved just as you are. As you can see, I have an amazing guest. She goes by the name of Mikah Miller. How's it going today, Mikah?
I'm great, Tom. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm so glad you joined me. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Do you mind if I introduce you to the good folks out there via your bio?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mikah Miller created her therapy style to take a different and more creative approach to therapy. As a licensed professional counselor with over 10 years of experience, she has worked with people of all ages who struggle with a range of personal and family issues. Through her work, she has seen firsthand how the use of humor in sessions has not only aided in strengthening rapport, but also increasing influence, improving the client's commitment to change, and strengthening communication. Her education background includes a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from Tuskegee University in Tuskegee, Alabama. Did you want to do a cheer or anything?
Woo, woo, to you.
It's written into the bio.
It is.
And a Master of Arts in Community Counseling from the Georgia School of Professional Psychology in Atlanta. She has experience in providing treatment for issues such as depression, anxiety, behavior modification, transition, and PTSD. She is a certified anger management specialist, certified juvenile offender specialist, and a certified professional counselor supervisor. Holy smokes. As I said before we even started, you were doing really, really amazing work out there in the world.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes. I always like to start off the interview by sharing, as amazing as our bios are, they can't ever share who we actually are, our essence. So if you're willing to share, what is something about you that maybe your friends know or you know, or what's something about you that could never be expressed in a bio, but is fully true?
I mean, like if I was to put it in like big words, it would say, I am dope. Like that's it.
I love that.
But to be very serious, I mean, like what you do see is really what you get. You get a very good combination of a therapist. You get a good combination of a friend, of a supporter, of a mentor, of a coach. I definitely, like I said, I've always been a funny, jolly, happy person. So you get a lot of that energy in session as well. I'm like your own private little cheerleader. The best description I've ever had was a client told me that I was like their professional best friend. So, if I was just to say, what do you not see on there? Is that you just don't see the energy. You don't really see kind of like what you're going to get when you actually come in session with me or around me.
I love that. I love that. Talk to me about your journey. Did you always know when you were growing up as a young child, I want to be a psychologist / social worker who uses humor to work with clients? Like, did you always know that?
No, I did not. Actually, it's funny. I actually wanted to be a banker. I wanted to own a bank. It was going to be called Miller Bank. But, when I got to really it was kind of like middle school, high school. I don't know if you remember Ricky Lake. I don't know how old you are, Tom. I'm old, but Ricky Lake was my jam. Jenny Jones, that was my jam. I used to watch all those shows, and Ricky Lake would always have like a specialist on the show. And I was like, intrigued by everything that came on Ricky Lake, so I'm like watching every story. My mom's like, you are so nosy. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm like trying to figure out how they're going to resolve this issue. So when I saw that she had actual therapists come on and kind of guide and speak to this situation, I was like, that's like a job. And I was just kind of, from that point on, I was just like, I'm going to do that. Whatever that is what I want to do. And I watched the movie The Sixth Sense. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but I watched that, and it kind of put everything together with being able to work with the population I like to work with, kids and teenagers, and kind of combine that Ricky Lake specialist of the day type vibe. So
That's awesome. I love that. My mother-in-law's in town, which is awesome, and she watches a lot of the Dr. Phil and stuff, and so I stepped in and saw, having the lens I have now, that like, wow, these shows actually aren't just spectacle. Like, they are talking about some serious things. So
yeah,
that's awesome. But I did know that one of the outcomes would be like a generation of kids who want to be social workers. That's amazing.
right.
When did the humor part start to come in? Did you know that right from the beginning, or was that something you talk to me about that part?
I think that's just with authenticity. I think they preached, authenticity in school. But I've always been, I'm not a comedian, but I've always been very funny. I've always been able to provide laughter, or kind of like any room I went into, I was able to kind of switch the tone a little bit with my humor. So I've always been that. So I just brought that into gradually into the world of being a therapist. I think I realized just being more so authentic to who I was especially with teenagers, because I work with at-risk teenagers, and it's a very difficult population to work with. So just me being very authentic in who I was, like whether I'm cracking jokes on them, they're cracking jokes on me. I realized like just making sure that I maintain who I was in those sessions with the humor and all that. I realized that was going to bring them in faster than me trying to fake like some prim proper therapist. That doesn't work for that population or for anybody really.
So what are you doing now? Are you working with the general population, private practice? What is the way that you find yourself serving now?
All right. So I am an entrepreneur full-time, Tom. I have a group practice in Canton, Georgia. So the practice is for everyone. So we are a creative and high energy center for all. The name is called With a Child's Heart Behavioral Health Center. So we work with children up from age 4 up until 99. But we do specialize, and we are known for being able to reach children and teenagers. But like I said, we do see everybody.
How did you become the entrepreneur part? How did you make that decision?
That was always a goal. When I started off my journey being a therapist, I knew it would be a long journey, but I knew that I wanted to have a place where kids wanted to come. Just because I knew that even myself growing up, that middle school was a very difficult transition, and nobody really talks about that. It's kind of like, okay, yep, elementary school's over, here's middle school, get to it, right? And so kids never really felt like, or I'll speak for myself, I didn't feel like that it was okay to really talk about some of these things. Like, what was anxiety? I had no idea what anxiety was growing up. What is depression? What is sadness? No one talked about it when I was growing up. And so for me, I wanted to make sure that mental health was actually a very open conversation. And it's something that people wanted to take care of. And I really want kids to start off knowing that mental health is something that you need to nurture and make sure you're healthy early on, because adults like I didn't know about it, and so therefore they're trying to go back and pull forward and kind of work on past issues, whereas kids will be able to have that opportunity to work on their issues as they come.
I love that. So I have found in my experience that middle school is the most challenging demographic to work with. Can you speak to a little bit why that is?
Because they're trying to find themselves. It's kind of like you go from elementary school where everybody's the same. We all kind of walk in the same line. We all, have to sit with each other in lunch. There's not much separation. Whereas in middle school, the bell rings, you get up and you leave. You go to your locker, you're responsible. You have more responsibilities. People are starting to kind of develop. People are starting to having, their hormones are all over the place, and having crushes, and looks matter a lot more. And kids become more aware of their looks. And so I think it's a very difficult population to work with, because these kids don't really know who they are and where they fit in. And so it's like, here comes someone trying to tell me how I should feel. But in the reality, they have no idea how they even feel. So it's a very hard way to kind of get them to open up.
So in the capacity I was working with young people was diversity and anti-bullying. And I found that around that middle school age, that's where you start to see like boys, start to take up space, like we learn, like men get socialized to do, and start to use their bodies to like, in a kind of a sexist way. They wouldn't name it like that, but like dominate space. And that's where you start to see some more like racialized bullying within schools, or homophobia bullying. Can you kind of give a professional lens to my just observations? Like, how come that part comes into like the more systemic, starting to participate in these systems of bullying that we do as adults that our systems are built upon? Why does that become so present at middle school as well?
I think because there's a heightened awareness in middle school, right? So elementary school, you hear about, politics, religion, hate, whatever it is, you hear about it, but you don't necessarily understand it. When you get to be, in middle school, you start to gradually start to really understand that, and kind of just start picking, like cherry picking sides, or picking or compartmentalizing yourself, versus letting yourself kind of grow and be open. So if you're raised, to like, apples over oranges, right? You're going to start to be hardcore about your apples, and you're going to start to voice more about your apples when you go to school, So it's kind of like, I feel like kids are feeling like they have to start kind of choosing, or making concrete decisions on what they should like, what they shouldn't like, who they should be. Oh, I'm starting to, grow armpit hair, so let me start acting more like a man, and this is how my dad acts, so let me start acting more like my dad. So I think it just becomes more of like, they're trying to kind of come into their own and kind of taking from only their experiences.
What's your advice for those of us who have young people in our lives, whether they're our siblings or our kids or our nieces, nephews, or we're just a mentor, for how to be there for them during this transition we're talking about now, or any of these transitions that happen in our youth?
Number one, pay attention, right? So make sure that you're not missing anything. And if you feel like you're paying attention and you're still not seeing anything, communicate. I always tell parents there's nothing wrong with over communicating with your kids. Even if it gets on their nerves, which it's going to, and they're going to tell you, but at least they know that you're there, and be open to being there. Be open to even the sensitive topics, whether it's sex, whether it's, racism, or whatever it is. Be open, don't be closed off. Don't, pretend like our movies don't exist, or, vulgarity doesn't exist, because I think that's when kids become more closed off to their parents, because they fear they'll be in trouble for talking about certain topics. Just be open.
Kind of on the other side of the coin, I once heard someone say, who, their expertise is in working with underserved young people, that one of the biggest issues that young people face is like the ability to express or communicate what they're feeling and what their needs are. Do you have any thoughts on that, or any advice or tools or anything that comes to mind?
And it's absolutely probably difficult, because like I said, they probably don't know what they're feeling. But as long as you create a space of openness, it'll come out, So whether it's just you making sure that you have a rapport with your kid, that you guys can have game night, that you guys can go and do certain things, just make sure you create an atmosphere of openness, and it will come out as it comes out. But you shouldn't force it. And it may be a time where you have to actually kind of just bring it down to their level, and maybe even share your own personal experience with something that you think they could be struggling with, being a little bit of vulnerable with your own kid,
Do you have any thoughts or observations on where the field of like social work and counseling and psychology, like where we are in general as a community, as a nation, areas of improvement, things that are going well, any transitions you're seeing? Do you have any thoughts around that?
I will actually say I am pleased with the progression right now. I'm very pleased with the progression right now, and I think it's a kudos to people that have these platforms. Kudos to celebrities. Kudos to people in the mental health field pushing forth, the agenda of like, let's destigmatize mental health. Like, this is a necessity. So I'm pleased with the progression. I know we have a ways to go to normalize mental health, but I would say that from where we were, I think we've crossed leaps and bounds in the mental health world.
On that note, what do you think are some stigmas that are still around, or stigmas that you see, or misconceptions around mental health that are prevalent that you want to speak to?
I mean, there's a lot. There's definitely racial, right? So there's definitely certain ethnicities that do not, believe in mental health, right? It could be a cultural thing. Various, reasons why. There's a disparity for sure. It's not available to everyone, and it's not affordable for everyone. Um, but I think that the biggest stigma is that they're gonna try to change me, or like, I guess, lobotomies back in the day. So a lot of people are like, nope, I'm no experiment. You're not gonna experiment on me. So I think a lot of, especially the older generations, definitely don't want to put themselves into a position where they're called crazy, or you have to be crazy to go to therapy, or people will look at you a certain way because you say you have a therapist. Like, I think that it's just looked upon like they can't handle theirselves, or that they don't need therapists. They can just go to their pastors. They can just go to their church. They can just go to their hairstylists, their barbers. So I think that a lot of this just kind of surrounds just how it looks to the outside world.
What's the difference between going to just talking to a good friend or your hairstylist or your religious leader versus going to a mental health professional?
Well, I mean, just kind of look at history. So I think even if you say, okay, I'm going to speak to my pastor on this, yeah, there may be some amazing advice that you give your pastor may give you on certain things, right? But your pastor is not a mental health professional. There's things that we know that your pastor does not know. As far as the depths of anxiety, coping skills for anxiety, and sometimes when you go the religious route, sometimes you'll only get the religious answer. And sometimes that's not going to be enough. Just go pray about it. Okay. But if we go that route, and if that's what you believe, then okay, so where are the works? Yeah, they say you can pray about it, but there's also a thing called works. Faith without works is dead. So where are your works? And if there have been, if you believe in God, the creator, that God put individuals on this planet. So those would be those works that you would need to seek out to work on those issues. So just praying about it and hoping things go away is kind of like treating your faith or whatever like God's a magician. And there's no works that are attached to that. So I think that when you go to your hairstylist, she's going to give you the advice based on her experiences, right? So her experiences are not your experiences. She's going to give you advice based on her love for you. So because she loves you, she may not be able to see the other side of the conflict. So therefore, she's going to take your side alone. So it's definitely not to your advantage to go to your friends or your barber or your hairstylist or your pastor, because you're going to get a very one-sided experience.
I just had an aha that it's true that usually when we give advice to people, it's based upon experience rather than professional training.
Right.
I'd like that. So talking about then the professional training side. So this is just because of the lens I see the world with. I've worked with mental health professionals, teachers who work with diverse populations on anti-bias, or biases built into the system. For example, in the healthcare system, and this, I'm just explaining to those who are listening. A lot of health professionals think that Black people have a higher pain threshold, so they underprescribe pain medication, or they misdiagnose because they have this bias. How do you think that we should be addressing that in the mental health professional space, or what are some of the conversations that we should be having?
I definitely think we should just have a conversation about, the differences in general. So in school we go through a class called multicultural competence, and that was one of my favorite classes because it's whites, it's Blacks, it's Asians, it's everyone in a collective discussing our own biases, right? So we're in a classroom, we're discussing, okay, so look at Jan over there. What's the first thing you thought about when you saw Jan? So we're exposing ourselves. And I think that you have to be willing to expose your own biases to really get down to nitty gritty. Like I said, I kind of work in rural Georgia. So I have a lot of white clients, a lot. And sometimes the question will be, how does it feel to have a Black therapist? And I'll just go ahead and knock it out the park, because that to me will help broach that relationship and bridge whatever gap there may be, and kind of get that out the way, right? Because of course you knew I was Black when you saw me on the internet, when you booked me, or maybe you didn't. but I feel like going ahead and knocking that out sometimes can create rapport just super, super fast. So just being honest about your ignorance, I've worked with the Asian population, and there's a lot of things that I don't know. And I will say, wow, like, can you tell me more about that? I have no idea that was something that was a concern. And I'll just be very vulnerable to listen. So it's like, don't just go in there as a know-it-all. Make sure that you go in there with an open mind and even share where your ignorance may lie so that they feel like, okay, this person is really trying to understand me. I do feel like a lot of times there is a generalized, okay, this person is hyper, this person is this person is that, they have ADHD. And so I feel like without going deeper into a person's history or figuring out things, you may misdiagnose someone. This is not ADHD. This might be PTSD because of the environment which they live in.
So on that note, I think I've seen a lot of really great research coming out about what PTSD looks like for young people who live in underserved populations where there's a lot of crime or they have to see a lot of trauma on a daily basis that's never addressed. Do you have any specialty in working with any of that kind of population, or do you want to speak to that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that is a big, huge concern. I get a lot of kids that come in because the parents are saying, okay, I took my kid to the doctor. The school said that they had ADHD. So take them to the doctor and get them put on medication. And I have a lot of parents that'll say, I have reservations about that. And it's usually Black boys or biracial boys that come in. And they'll say I have reservations about just putting my kid on meds. I want them to talk to someone first. And almost every time, 9 times out of 10, I do discover there's underlying trauma with these kids that has just been unresolved. And because parents don't really necessarily talk about mental health or know about what trauma can do or how it can look or how it manifests in individuals, they do take a professional's opinion, based on, like I said, that professional's experience, and kind of do the recommendation. And usually, like I said, with treatment and with talking and with getting kids to open up about what the experiences are, you see those behaviors kind of decrease. Because if you have trauma, of course, it's going to be hard to process and sit still in class because you're thinking about things, or you may have had a flashback, or someone may have said something that triggered you in class, and now you're off task because you're angry. Right. And so it's like, these are things that need to be like discussed amongst the population that have gone through this type of traumatic experiences versus written off as ADHD or written off as a behavioral issue or written off as a kid that just is unable to learn.
And with the triggering, what comes to mind too is a lot of times you have to pass the same spots every single day where the traumatic event happened, to go to school, to come back home. What do you think? Because I think a lot of this falls on a lot of the shoulders of educators, because that's where a lot of young people in their youth end up. What do you think for educators are some things they should look for or just be mindful of if they're working with the population that we're talking about?
Patterns, definitely look at some patterns. Definitely make sure that you know the kid. Sometimes, if you recognize, okay, this kid is very smart, he can be very, he or she can be very engaged, or they in the classroom setting, but their homework is never done, or they come in every morning and they're exhausted. Start to kind of look at patterns and maybe pull the kid aside and have them help you, shuffle papers, and you just kind of like just build a rapport with them so they feel open. Introduce your kids to the school counselor. Have the school counselor come into the classroom and share their purpose and what they're for and why they're there. I think a lot of times school counselors get the rap of they just do testing and they just do schedules or whatever. But school counselors really want to be there for these kids. And so this, like, they want to go and talk to their classes. They want the kids to come in there and talk to them. I think there definitely needs to be more school counselors so that kids can have them available to them, more often.
That's powerful. For you, I see that you're an anger management specialist. What advice do you have for someone who's listening right now that maybe has a bit of an anger problem or is in a relationship with someone who has an anger problem?
That it's something deeper. Anger is a choice, right? And so usually when you have anger problems, that's because something has just sizzled in your life like a volcano. Something has just been festering forever and ever and ever, right? And you're just holding on to all these experiences and all these emotions and all this, whether it's emotional abuse or verbal abuse or physical abuse or trauma or whatever, abandonment, neglect, whatever it is, you've been holding on to all this stuff for so long, and you have a short fuse, or you've mimicked the behavior that you've seen in a parent or a guardian or whomever, and you've never really recognize that this was a touchy area in your life that you've allowed to manifest in you as a teenager or an adult. But yeah, I would say that if there's an angry person or an angry spouse, there's something deeper.
What's that first step to, if you're like, okay, I'm angry, I understand you're saying there's something deeper. How do I figure out what that deeper thing is so I can change this?
Well, that's the first step. You admit it. So that's awesome, right? Saying like, I don't want to be this person. The next step is, okay, are you open to therapy? Sometimes just going and call a therapist is a very quick step. They may not necessarily be ready for that. It could be, all right, so can I just go get an evaluation? Can I take a assessment at the doctor's office first? Some people will do that. I've worked in community mental health, and they've gone to the doctors, and doctors are now very inclusive of mental health. So they'll issue out like depression screenings or anxiety screenings, or like even levels of anger screenings, stuff like that. And so once they have that visible paper in their hands, that's like, oh, wow, I didn't know I had this issue, they're more likely to then make the phone call. So sometimes it may even be a little bit of a step in between making that final call to call a therapist.
What about kind of on the other end, if you're in a relationship with somebody who has an anger problem, how do you make that decision between like, I'm going to stay here and try to have you get help, and kind of make the decision when you need to have boundaries with that person?
I think that if you're consistently telling the loved one that they need to get help, and they're consistently telling you that they're not going to do something, then at that point you need to assess your own standards and your value. Do they value me enough to maintain this relationship? Do they value themselves enough to want to get and be a better person? So I think it would come with kind of assessing. But if you're saying the same thing and you're a broken record, at that point you need to look at yourself and say, what are my standards for myself? Is this it?
What about though if it's like your parent or your spouse, like that guilt that might come up of, you might have to cut this person off for a little bit or create boundaries. What advice do you have for somebody maybe around the guilt that comes when you initially start creating boundaries?
Yeah, like I said, if you've done it so much and it's to the point where you're hurting yourself to do it, to create the guilt that you would have from creating the boundary is going to be something that you're just going to have to work through. Because either way, you got to go through the fire. So either you're going to sit in the fire or you're going to walk through it, right? And come out on the other side. So I don't necessarily think it's wise to just sit in your guilt, because it's going to be there regardless. But you got to keep it and you got to walk through it. And you may need to go get counseling for whatever possible codependent issue you might have, or reason why you put others before yourself. So, I mean, put them in counseling and you go see a counselor.
So a lot of us, especially with social media, anxiety is a constant presence in a lot of people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice for people, or things they can do, and words you can share with people who are like, okay, they're pausing whatever they were doing now, and now I'm asking this question and they're listening closely?
So I think anxiety looks different in everybody. Anxiety looks different in from a child to an adult. So, I mean, it depends on how your anxiety presents itself. But I am I don't know if you go on my page, but I'm a huge advocate of self-care, right? Because self-care is something that you do before things get out of hand, right? So if you already know you hate your job, and you already know come Monday morning that you're going to dread walking in those gates, and you're going to have anxiety and you're going to feel a certain type of way, then you shouldn't be spending your whole entire weekend not doing things to empower yourself, not doing things to pour into yourself, not making plans for something better. So self-care can be, okay, let me set some goals. Self-care can be, let me go exercise, let me go paint, let me do some woosah, let me do something that's going to bring me to a level of feeling refreshed so that I can tackle something that I'm doing just in the meantime. But if you don't, if you don't take care of yourself, then one, yeah, your anxiety is going to be even higher. So that's something that you can do to at least minimize your anxiety. There are also other things that you can do, like skills once you're in a moment of anxiety, whether it's, like I said, people have various ways they have anxiety, but like, some people hold ice cubes, in their hands, or say mantras, or listen to music, or take deep breaths, or, go for a hike. It just really depends on the way your anxiety looks and if it manifests itself into like a panic attack.
So I want to talk a little bit about the professional as the entrepreneur, and sharing your message on social media. So I know a lot of health professionals that I've worked with, their big worry about being on social media is their client finding them, or somebody seeing something and it being used against them, or them being sued for, like, they somehow established a client relationship by responding to people's comments on their posts. What are some of the things that you've worked through in finding the voice and the courage to share the important work you're doing?
One thing that's huge is that this is 2019, right? So we're in a completely different time and era than we were 20 years ago when a lot of these laws and things were put into place. But for me, I have a confidentiality, and I have a clause in my informed consent to my clients that see me about social media. I can't friend you on social media. We can't talk through social media. But here's the thing. I can't stop someone from finding me on social media, but I'm not going to open up myself to befriend them or be their friend or talk to them or do any of those types of things. But because my page is open, yeah, you can find me. That's fine. But that would be no different if I had a grocery store that I owned and, my client came in the grocery store. I couldn't say, you can't come in my grocery store because, hey, it's an open grocery store. So I don't necessarily have that issue. There is a very fine line between being an advocate and being a person that provides the information and being someone's therapist on social media. I am nobody's therapist. It is not a substitute for therapy. For me, it's more so like bringing people that may be reluctant to even go to therapy, just providing little tips and little, funny ways to kind of get them to buy in to the idea that therapy is necessary. So I am nobody's therapist on social media.
I know it's a personal question, but if you're willing to share, where do you find the inner courage to put yourself out there, to share your message? Because it's something that when I work with people, that initial, like, I have a message, I have something I want to share with the world, but I'm worried about rejection or ridicule or failure. What has been your journey with finding the courage to do that?
So for me, because I've worked with so many different clients, I've seen the beginning and I've seen the end. I've seen, and I feel like there are so many various ways on the universe that we have been to heal ourselves. There's so many various ways and afforded to us to heal ourselves that I just, it's almost like I just get frustrated sometimes. I'm like, man, listen, like, do you understand that this issue that you've had for 25 years could be a whole lot less if you just saw a therapist, or if you just worked on it and opened it up? So I am just a huge advocate for just healing, period. There's just too many ways to heal ourselves for us to kind of just sit in our stuff. You don't have to sit in your stuff. You don't have to, and so I think for me, it's kind of like ridicule or whatever, for me, it's more so the message, like, I know what therapy can do. Therapists are in therapy. They should be. If they're not, they need to be. But to be a good therapist, you have to be in therapy, and to be able to go through the journey with your clients and know, like, you could be you can be who you've always wanted to be. You can be your best self every single day. So why not engage in something that will only help you?
I love that. I bet a lot of people listening to that resonated as well. What's your advice to somebody who maybe is listening to this or is seeing you on social media and they're like just on the precipice of saying yes to therapy, but something's holding them back. What's your advice, or what would you like to say to someone who's like right at that moment?
I always tell people, like, you may not hit the mark the first time you go to therapy, and be okay with that. So just pull the trigger, just go, just go to therapy, see what it's like. And if you don't make that connection with your therapist, if you don't feel like, that connection is there, go again. Go at least 3 to 4 times before you say, you know what, this is not for me. And if you feel like maybe it's the actual therapist, we are trained to have our feelings hurt. Tell them what it is that makes you feel uncomfortable or feel like this is not a good connection. And go ahead and share that. And maybe they'll refer you to someone that may be a better fit, but don't give up. Don't just quit, and don't just say therapy is not for me based on one experience. Just try it.
And what about, we had talked about it earlier, but the accessibility to therapy? What if for me, I don't have the resources, or I don't have health insurance? What's your suggestions or advice for someone in that situation?
So thankfully, there are a lot of resources now, but you have to do the work if you're serious, right? So, I know I can only speak for Georgia, but I know, we have a lot of community service boards that have free to sliding scale fees for services, even medications. I know in downtown Atlanta, a lot, especially if you're uninsured or homeless or indigent, that they have free services for you. I was a therapist for those that had no funds, no insurance, no anything. And I loved it. And so you can go to those type of places that are connected with hospitals, like state hospitals, that can assist you for free. Now, if you are uncomfortable with that type of area, then you can go to private practices that have interns, that have master's level students that will also see you for free to a low fee as well. And they are just as good as therapists. They're just in training and haven't finished their residencies.
I love that. That's really helpful to know and to hear. On the entrepreneurship level, what's it like owning your own practice?
It's amazing. It's freedom, because when you do work for someone else, you have to kind of follow their blueprint, right? How they want their organization or practice to look. For me, this is mine, right? This is my, everything in all my offices has a Disney theme. I have disco balls and disco lights and music and surround sound and all that stuff, and I'm able to be free and creative with my clients the way I want to. And my clinicians that do work here are able to be free and creative with their clients.
What do you think are some misconceptions people have about entrepreneurship?
That it's for everybody. And I'll just go ahead and say that it's for everybody. Entrepreneurship is not easy, right? Entrepreneurship, it's driven by passion. It's not driven by money. So if you're getting into entrepreneurship because you just think you're going to make all this money, then you're going to struggle in the beginning or you're going to give up, because you have to go in it with the intention of, if I don't make a dime, I'll still do this tomorrow. So I think there's a misconception that it's easy and that you can do it even if you have no passion for it. What's going to keep you going 10 years from now with no passion for what you're doing? If the money is still not coming in, nothing. So, if you want a sustainability, lead with passion.
And what's your advice for people who they want that passion, but they don't have it, or they want to find a purpose, but they don't know what it is?
It's to keep walking, keep going, stay in alignment, right? Just keep staying in alignment, because eventually it'll find you. It will find you. But if you consistently, like I said, I love you're cherry picking and you're like, okay, I want to, sell chips today. I want to do eyebrows tomorrow. I want to do this. And you're just all over the place without like sitting and maybe just focusing, then you're gonna feel like you're not gonna find your passion ever. So just kind of be patient. Be very patient.
I found for myself that one of the most important parts of entrepreneurship is having a growth mindset around failure. Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts, or from your experience, things you can speak to on that?
Absolutely. And I feel like nothing is a failure. Everything is an experience, right? Everything that has happened in my journey has been something that's taught me a lesson. So everything is recycled. So nothing goes unrecycled. So this experience, whether it may have looked like a failure to someone else, all right, that was a stepping stone experience for me. I'll take that, notate that, and improve on that on down the line.
I love that. Everything is an experience. It's all a part of it. That's amazing. You might have heard me say at the very beginning that this is my year of grace. And so what that is for me is it's an intention to model and to infuse my year with. And at the same time, I also like to have a conversation with my guests about what my year of is. So for you, if you don't mind sharing, what is your definition of grace, or what does grace look like for you?
Grace for me is despite my disobedience, to disobedience to the gifts that have been put in me, disobedience to the goals or plans I've set for myself, that I'm still walking in my purpose anyway, that I'm still afforded the opportunities that I have been afforded, that I'm still building and standing and still have a business. That is grace to me, is that even in my disobedience, when I don't do the things that I should be doing, I still have.
I love that. Well, I want to thank you so much for being a guest. This has been such a pleasure. And I know that people have really gotten a lot out of this interview. So for the people who want to continue the conversation with you and share with you how awesome you are, where can they do that?
So mainly on Instagram. So my Instagram is Mikah Miller, and that's MIKAHMILLER. I have a Mikah Miller page. I also have the With a Child's Heart BHC page that is more so geared towards parents and professionals that work with children. But if you want to find me, you can find me at Mikah Miller on Instagram.
And for those who are on the go, show notes for today are tommerl.com/Mikah, tommerl.com/MIKAH, tommerl.com/Mikah. So once again, just want to thank you for, taking that leap of faith and saying yes to this interview. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having me, Tom. It's been awesome.
My pleasure. Our closing ritual is for you to share an invitation with those who are listening. So what's your invitation to them to be, to become, to think about, to do? What's your invitation?
I would have to say life is like a bicycle. In order to maintain balance, you got to keep going.
I love that. Oh. Well, thank you once again. I appreciate it so much. You're amazing. And I just want to encourage people to follow you on Instagram and to, infuse their life with a lot of the wonderful content that you're sharing. So thank you.
Thank you.
And to all of those listening, as always, we're wishing you peace and blessings. Thank you. One more thing. I'd love to continue the conversation. Feel free to join me at tommerl.com/join. Subscribe below, or let's connect on social media. Tom Earl Artist. Thanks again for watching.